Tycoon he wife pregnant, but when she leaves, he desperately wants her. The city never slept, not even for a second. Neon lights painted the skyline with artificial warmth, and luxury cars hummed through the smooth streets of Seoul. From the top floor of one of the tallest skyscrapers, the world looked peaceful, serene, even. But inside the penthouse, a silence lingered, heavy and suffocating. Elena stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, her hands gently resting on her lower abdomen. Her gaze was fixed on the glowing city below, but her thoughts were far away. The hem of her silk nightgown brushed against her ankles, but the fabric felt cold against her skin. Everything felt cold lately. She turned slightly at the sound of the door unlocking. Dylan Park entered, dressed sharply in his usual dark suit, the scent of expensive cologne trailing behind him. He didn't greet her. He didn't even glance her way. He walked straight to the bar, poured himself a glass of whiskey, and downed it in one go. She waited for him to say something, anything, but as always, silence filled the space between them like an ocean. "You're late," Elena finally whispered, her voice almost swallowed by the vastness of the room. "I had meetings," Dylan replied curtly, removing his jacket and tossing it carelessly on the couch. She didn't push. She never did, but her heart ached in the quiet. She turned back to the window, blinking away the tears that threatened to fall. How did it come to this? 2 years of marriage, and she still felt like a stranger in her own home. Or maybe just a shadow in his. He walked past her, barely acknowledging her presence. The man she once admired, brilliant, composed, untouchable, now felt like a ghost. Not because he wasn't there, but because he never truly saw her. "Did you eat?" she asked softly. "I'm not hungry, that was all." She nodded slowly. A faint smile appeared on her lips, one filled with resignation more than affection. "Okay." Dylan stopped for a brief moment before disappearing into his study, shutting the door behind him with a dull thud. And just like that, she was alone again. She placed a hand on her belly, feeling the slight flutter inside her. The very beginning of life. Their life. A life he didn't even know about yet. She hadn't told him. She didn't know how. Every time she rehearsed the words, they caught in her throat. Would he care? Would he smile? Would he hold her like she used to dream he would? Or would he just nod, the way he always did, and return to his world of mergers, acquisitions, and numbers? That night, she couldn't sleep. She laid in their bed, his side untouched, her pillow damp with silent tears. She thought of the girl she used to be, the one who believed in love, in fairy tales, in happy endings. The girl who once laughed with Dylan in the rain before they were married, who held his hand when no one else dared to get close to him. He wasn't always like this. There were moments, fleeting but real, when she saw warmth in his eyes, when he smiled at her as if she were the only person in the world. But power changes people, or maybe it just reveals who they've always been. The next morning, the housekeeper brought breakfast to the table. Elena sat quietly, watching the steam rise from the tea she wouldn't drink. Dylan sat across from her, skimming through financial reports on his tablet. "I'm pregnant," she said, the words trembling out of her mouth like porcelain ready to shatter. The room froze. Even the clock on the wall seemed to tick louder. Dylan looked up slowly, his expression unreadable. "Since when?" "About 7 weeks." He blinked once. "I see." That was it. No smile, no questions, no reaching out for her hand. Just a cold, lifeless statement. "I thought you should know," she murmured. He went back to his tablet. "You'll need a private doctor. I'll have my assistant arrange everything." Elena stared at him, her heart crumbling piece by piece. "That's not what I need, Dylan." He looked at her then, slightly annoyed. "What do you want me to say, Elena? Congratulations? Do you want a celebration? You know I'm not built for this kind of sentimentality." "I don't want a celebration," she said, standing up. Her voice was shaking, but her eyes burned with something deeper, pain. "I just wanted you to care." His jaw clenched, and for a second he almost softened. Almost. But the years of emotional detachment wrapped around him like armor. "Don't make this more dramatic than it has to be," he replied. Her heart screamed, but her lips remained still. She nodded, walking away from the table, from the man she once loved, and into the quiet corridor where her tears could fall unnoticed. Later that evening, Dylan stood in his study, staring at the ultrasound photo she left on his desk. A small black and white blur that meant nothing to anyone but her. And perhaps to him too. But he didn't know how to feel. His hands trembled slightly as he picked it up. A child. His child. But instead of joy, all he felt was fear. He didn't know how to love. He didn't know how to protect. So he did what he always did. He closed the door. And outside, Elena packed a single suitcase. No fight. No begging. No farewell speech. She wrote him a short letter and left it on the pillow. "I never asked for perfection. I only wanted your heart. I'm not leaving to punish you. I'm leaving to protect what little is left of mine. And of our child." By the time Dylan found the letter, she was already gone. And for the first time in a very long time, the tycoon who ruled everything felt powerless. He sat on the bed, the echo of her absence screaming louder than any boardroom silence. Elena was gone. Her letter lay folded on the pillow, creased from where he'd held it too tightly the night before. He hadn't slept. His phone lay untouched. His secretary had called 7 times, probably more, but he hadn't picked up. He just sat there, staring at the photo she left on his desk. Black and white, small, but louder than any boardroom applause he'd ever received. Their child. His child. He didn't even know if it was a boy or a girl. He pressed the bridge of his nose, trying to breathe through the pounding in his chest. It wasn't supposed to feel like this. He had everything: power, wealth, respect. People bent when he walked into rooms. Companies trembled at his decisions. But right now, none of it mattered. She had walked away. Not in rage, not in bitterness, but in silence. And somehow that made it so much worse. A knock echoed against the penthouse door. It opened slowly, revealing Minji, his longtime assistant, carrying a folder. She hesitated when she saw the state of him. Tie undone, shirt wrinkled, dark circles under his eyes. "Mr. Park, I've been calling. You had meetings this morning. They can wait," he said hoarsely. Eyes still fixed on the window where the clouds gathered beyond the skyline. Minji stepped in slowly, lowering her voice. "She's really gone?" He didn't answer. Instead, he reached into his drawer and pulled out a velvet box. Inside, a delicate bracelet, silver, small, elegant. Elena had once admired it in a shop window during one of their rare vacations. He'd bought it. He never gave it to her. He snapped the box shut. "I need you to find her." Minji blinked. "Sir, Elena, I need you to find her. Use whatever resources you need." Quietly, Minji hesitated. "If I may, what are you going to do when you find her?" "I don't know," he muttered, his voice cracking for the first time in years. "But I can't let her disappear. Not like this. Not with my—" He stopped. He didn't even know how to say it. His child. His wife. Gone. Minji nodded slowly and left. As the door clicked shut, Dylan slumped into his chair. He felt it again. That strange sensation in his chest. Was it regret? Was it fear? He couldn't tell. All he knew was that something had broken, and he couldn't fix it with a bank transfer or a contract. 3 days passed. The apartment remained untouched. The kitchen was still as spotless as the day she left. But now he noticed the little things. The empty teacup she had left on the windowsill, the book she had bookmarked on page 173, the soft cardigan draped over the armrest. Her scent lingered, her absence screamed, and finally a call came. "She's not in the city," Minji reported carefully. "She used an old alias. Checked into a small guest house 2 hours outside Seoul." It's modest. Very modest. Dylan closed his eyes. That sounded like her. Humble. Independent. He didn't deserve someone like her. He had known that from the beginning. But it had taken losing her to feel the weight of what that really meant. "I'll go," he said. "But sir, your meeting with the Singapore investors. Cancel it." His voice was steel now. The mask of the Tycoon slid back into place. Not for a business deal, but for the woman who had once held his heart gently in her hands, and whom he had let slip away. The road twisted through hills and forests until the car finally stopped outside a tiny house with cracked wooden steps and a peeling fence. It was raining, a soft drizzle that kissed the earth instead of bruising it. Dylan stepped out, his shoes sinking slightly into the muddy ground. He didn't bring an umbrella. He didn't care. He climbed the steps slowly. The front door was partially open. He paused, breath caught in his throat, then knocked gently. No answer. He pushed the door open. There she was. Elena stood by the window, her back to him, holding something close to her chest. A tiny bundle. Their baby. His heart stopped. "Elena," he whispered. She turned slowly, her eyes tired, but alert, protective, stronger somehow, as if the quiet had shaped her into something more unshakable. She didn't say anything. His eyes fell to the baby in her arms. Tiny fingers, barely the size of his thumb, wrapped around a pink blanket. A girl, his daughter. He stepped forward instinctively, but stopped when Elena moved slightly, shielding the baby. "I'm not here to take her away," he said quickly, his voice low, full of something new, uncertainty. "Then why are you here?" she asked quietly. "Because you finally read the letter? Because you realized you're a father? Or because your pride couldn't handle being left?" Every word stung. He looked down. "I don't know," he admitted. "Maybe all of it." She watched him carefully. "I didn't come to beg," he continued. "And I won't ask you to come back. I needed to see you, to see her, to say I'm sorry." Her arms tightened around the baby. "I was never angry at you, Dylan. I was just tired of feeling like I didn't exist." "You did," he said, stepping closer. "You do. I was just too blind to see it. Too scared to let myself feel anything real." The rain outside grew heavier. "I don't expect forgiveness," he added, "but I'll wait for it, however long it takes." There was silence again, but it wasn't like before. This one wasn't empty. It was filled with unsaid words, old pain, and the fragile thread of something that might still remain. She looked down at their daughter, who shifted in her arms with a tiny sigh. "She looks like you," Elena whispered. Dylan smiled faintly, his eyes wet. "I was hoping she'd look like you." For the first time in weeks, a crack appeared in her cold exterior. She stepped aside, just a little, enough to let him in. Not into the house, but into a possibility. He took a hesitant step forward, and the door closed behind him with a soft click. Neither of them had spoken much after she let him in. There was no rush. Every word carried weight now. Every glance spoke more than speeches could. Elena gently laid the baby down in a wicker crib lined with a faded, hand-stitched quilt. Then she turned, finally meeting Dylan's eyes. Her face was calm, but unreadable. "She's only 3 weeks old," she said. "She doesn't sleep through the night. She cries for no reason sometimes. And I don't always know what to do." He nodded slowly, swallowing a lump that had formed in his throat. "You've done everything," he murmured. "You carried her, brought her into the world, all by yourself." "No," she replied, "not by myself. I had help. The owner of the guest house, a nurse from the clinic nearby, a few strangers who were kind when I needed them most." He flinched slightly, guilt sweeping through him. "And me? Where was I?" She didn't answer. That was answer enough. He stood, cautiously approaching the crib. He looked down at his daughter, soft pink cheeks, tiny fists twitching as she dreamed. His eyes stung with the emotion he was too late to name. "What's her name?" he asked gently. "Haun," Elena said after a pause. "It means grace and kindness." He repeated the name under his breath like a prayer. "Haun. I didn't put your name on the birth certificate," she added quietly. "I wasn't sure if you'd want that." He turned to her sharply, voice low but firm. "Of course I want that. I want her to know who she is, who her father is." "And who is that, Dylan?" she asked, her eyes piercing. A man who builds empires but forgets his home? A man who sees everything except what truly matters. His voice caught. "I'm trying," he whispered. "I know that doesn't mean much now, but I am. For the first time in my life, I'm really trying." Elena folded her arms, leaning slightly against the wall, her voice calm but unwavering. Trying means showing up, not disappearing into work. Trying means asking how I feel instead of assuming. It means listening, being present, loving not just in words, but with time, with choices. "I know," he said, stepping back. "You think I don't understand, but I do. I know what I became. I was afraid. I've always been afraid that if I let someone in, they'd leave like my mother did, like my father did. So I built walls and called them protection." Her expression softened just slightly. "You always looked so confident, untouchable," she said, almost wistfully. "I didn't know you were hurting too. I didn't want you to," he confessed. "I didn't want anyone to. I thought if I stayed cold, I wouldn't lose control. But in the end, I lost you, and her, before I even had a chance." Elena's gaze flickered toward the crib. "You still have a chance, but it won't be easy." "I don't want easy," he said. "I want real, even if it hurts, even if it takes time." They stood there in silence again, not awkward, but aching. A silence born from wounds that were starting to breathe, not yet heal. Suddenly, the baby stirred. A soft whimper turned into a sharp cry. Without thinking, Elena moved, but Dylan reached the crib first. His hands were unsteady, but his movements were gentle as he picked up the baby and cradled her awkwardly. She cried louder. "She's not used to you yet," Elena said, stepping in. "No, let me try," he said. He rocked slightly, murmuring nonsense under his breath, trying to soothe her. His suit jacket wrinkled under the pressure of her tiny weight. For a moment, she looked up at him, eyes barely open, but focused. He froze, breath caught in his chest. Then, like a tiny miracle, she stopped crying. Elena blinked. Dylan looked at her with a mix of disbelief and wonder. She knows me," he said, voice cracking. "She doesn't know what you've done," Elena replied, stepping closer. "She just feels your heartbeat. And for now, that's enough." The baby yawned and nuzzled into his shoulder. He didn't want to let go. He wasn't ready. "I missed everything," he said, eyes never leaving his daughter. Her first breath, her first cry. "I missed it all." Elena nodded, her voice barely audible. "But you're here now." He turned to her, eyes raw. "Do you think one day she could forgive me?" Elena looked at him, something fragile passing between them. "If you show her who you can be, maybe." A knock on the door shattered the fragile peace. Elena frowned. "I'm not expecting anyone." Dylan tensed. He handed the baby back to her gently, then moved toward the door. When he opened it, a sleek black car idled on the road. A woman stood under a red umbrella, tall, elegant, familiar. Dylan's breath caught. It was Ji-young, the one who had once stood beside him at galas, whispered into his ear during champagne toasts, the woman who had always known the right thing to say to everyone, except him. "Hello, Dylan," she said with a poised smile. "You've been hard to find." Elena stepped into the hall, cradling the baby. Her eyes met Ji-young's. Neither said a word. Ji-young's gaze flicked from Elena to the baby to Dylan. "So it's true," she murmured. "You left everything for this?" Elena didn't flinch, but Dylan stepped forward. "What are you doing here?" "I came to bring you back," Ji-young said. "The company needs you. Investors are getting nervous. You've been gone too long." "I'm exactly where I need to be," he replied. Ji-young's eyes narrowed. "And what about what you built? You're just going to walk away?" For her, he didn't even hesitate. "I built everything, but I destroyed this." He looked back at Elena and Haun. "And I'm not making the same mistake twice." For the first time, Ji-young looked truly caught off guard. "This isn't you," she said. "No," he replied, his voice clear, steady, final. "This is finally me." He closed the door gently. When he turned back, Elena was staring at him, a complex wave of emotion on her face. "You didn't have to do that," she said. "I did," he replied, "because if I walked back into that world, I'd lose this again, and I won't survive losing it twice." She stared at him for a long time. Then she whispered, "Stay." He didn't move. "I mean it," she said, voice trembling now. "Stay the night. Rock her to sleep. Wake up with her crying. Let's see if you're really ready for this life." Not in words, in action. He nodded, emotion thick in his throat. "I'll stay." Dylan was in the nursery, his jacket off, sleeves rolled up, rocking the baby gently in his arms. He looked different under the soft yellow light. Less guarded, less distant. His jaw was still tense, but not with anger anymore. It was something else now, something softer, something afraid. Elena watched from the doorway. "She likes when you hum," she said quietly. He turned his head, startled for a moment. Then he smiled faintly, the kind of smile she hadn't seen since their honeymoon. "I don't even know if I remember how." "Try," she whispered. So he did. Off-key, low and clumsy, but real. The baby's eyelids fluttered, and eventually, she settled back into sleep. "She's heavier than I expected," he murmured, carefully laying her down. "So small. But she carries everything." Elena nodded. "That's what motherhood feels like, holding the world in your arms." Dylan turned toward her, leaning against the edge of the crib, his expression unreadable. "Why didn't you call me when you went into labor?" She hesitated. Then she met his eyes, her voice raw. "Because I didn't want to be disappointed again. I didn't want to hope you'd show up, only to feel empty when you didn't." His eyes dropped to the floor, and his throat worked hard as he tried to swallow that truth. "I deserved that," he said quietly. "But I wish I'd been there." "I wished that too," she whispered. "Right until the very last push." He looked at her then, not as someone he failed, not as a wife who had walked away, but as a woman who had survived something sacred without him. And somehow that was even harder to bear. "I missed her first breath," he said. "Her first heartbeat outside of you." "But you didn't miss the chance to become her father," Elena replied. "Not yet, if you really want it." He stepped closer, his voice cracking. "More than anything." There was a beat of silence. Then she whispered, "Then fight for it. Not just with grand gestures, Dylan. Fight with patience. Fight with showing up. With folding laundry, with changing diapers, with listening. Fight in the boring moments. In the hard ones. That's what love looks like." He nodded slowly. "I will." They sat down at the table after putting Haun to sleep, and for the first time in what felt like years, they ate together. It was a simple meal, porridge, kimchi, and warm rice, but it tasted like home. Not because of the food, but because of the quiet presence between them. No phones, no business calls, no silence stretched by indifference. "I used to watch you from across the dining table," Elena said softly, her spoon lingering halfway to her lips. "And I'd wonder what you were thinking. I imagined all these things, but you never spoke." "I didn't know how," he admitted. "I spent so long hiding what I felt that it became natural to stay quiet. I thought feelings made me weak, that if I let them out, they'd swallow me." "And now?" she asked. He looked up at her. "Now I realize silence was the loudest way I pushed you away." She placed her spoon down, folding her hands. "I don't expect you to change overnight. I won't ask you to forgive me overnight either," he said. "But I'll earn it, every single day." The moment hung there like glass between them, fragile, yet shimmering with possibility. But then a sound came from the window, a soft tap, then another. They both turned their heads. Someone was outside. Dylan rose first, instinctively stepping in front of Elena as he opened the door. The porch light flickered against the figure standing just beyond the fence. It was a man, middle-aged, in a raincoat, umbrella tucked under one arm. He looked nervous. "Are you Elena?" he asked, glancing past Dylan's shoulder. She stepped forward slowly, eyes narrowing. "Yes. Who are you?" He hesitated, then pulled a worn envelope from his coat pocket. "This is from your mother," he said. Elena froze. "My mother?" she echoed. "That's impossible. I was told to deliver this if you ever left Seoul," he said. "She knew you might disappear one day. Said you'd only do it if your heart was broken enough to never look back." Elena reached for the envelope with trembling hands. She hadn't heard from her mother in over 5 years. Their relationship had always been strained, painful, complicated. Her mother had always criticized her choices, especially her marriage to Dylan. "She passed away last month," the man added, voice gentler now. "Cancer." The words hit her like ice. Her knees nearly buckled, but Dylan caught her arm. Why now?" she whispered. "She left a diary, said there were things she never had the courage to say, but she wrote them down." Elena held the envelope against her chest. "Thank you," she said, her voice barely audible. The man nodded and left as quietly as he came. Back inside, Elena sat on the edge of the bed, envelope still sealed. Her fingers hovered over the flap, but they didn't move. "I don't know if I can read this," she said. "You don't have to do it alone," Dylan replied, kneeling beside her. "I'll stay, as long as you need." Tears welled in her eyes, but not because of the letter, because for the first time he saw her. Not just her strength or her silence, but the pieces that broke and bled beneath it all. She nodded slowly. "I'll read it tomorrow." And as the night deepened around them, neither of them noticed the shadows starting to shift, old wounds ready to rise again, not just from their own pasts, but from the legacy of pain that came before them. Dylan had fallen asleep on the couch, his tall frame curled awkwardly, still dressed in yesterday's clothes. A blanket half covered him. Elena had placed it there in silence while he slept. She looked at the envelope again. The paper was soft with age, edges slightly torn, as if it had traveled a long way to reach her hands. Her fingers trembled as she finally peeled it open. Inside was a single sheet of paper and a dried flower tucked in between lavender. The same flower her mother used to keep under her pillow when Elena was a child. Her eyes filled with tears before they even began to move across the page. "My Elena," it began, in her mother's familiar handwriting, shaky, imperfect, but unmistakably hers. Dylan stirred behind her, slowly waking. He saw her there, motionless, and the silence around her felt different now, more fragile. He rose and approached carefully, standing a few feet behind. She didn't turn, but she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "She wrote to me, knowing she'd be gone when I read it. Do you want me to leave you alone?" he asked gently. "No," she said. "You stayed when I needed you. You can stay now." He nodded and sat nearby, not too close, giving her the space to breathe but anchoring himself as support. Elena cleared her throat and began to read aloud, slowly, as if each word weighed more than the one before. "I was not a kind mother to you, and I know that. I know the silence I left between us was never quiet. It was screaming. I judged you not because I didn't love you, but because I was afraid. Afraid you'd make the same mistakes I did. And when you married him, I saw myself. I saw the girl I once was, full of hope, waiting to be noticed. But I never told you my truth. I never told you how your father truly left. Not because he didn't love us, but because I pushed him away, just like I pushed you." Elena's breath hitched, and her hands began to shake. Dylan moved slightly closer, not touching her, but letting his presence speak for him. "I always thought she hated me for choosing you," Elena whispered, tears beginning to slip down her cheeks. "But it wasn't hate. It was fear." He said nothing. He let her feel. She continued reading, each line cutting deeper. "I saw the way you looked at him, Elena, the way your eyes followed his, even when he didn't notice. I saw the love you gave without asking for anything in return. That is both your greatest strength and the wound I gave you. I taught you to expect so little, to stay silent, to endure, and I'm sorry. I wish I had told you that love is not something you must earn by disappearing. It is not something you beg for with your silence. If he loves you, truly loves you, He will fight for you when you are too tired to fight for yourself. Elena stopped reading. The air around her felt heavy, as if her mother's words had reached across time to press a hand to her heart. She looked at Dylan, her eyes red, raw. "I spent years thinking I was the reason people leave," she said. "That if I had just been better, more perfect, they would have stayed. My mother, you? I never left because of you," Dylan said, finally breaking his silence. "I left because of me, because I was too afraid to be seen, because I thought I had to earn love with success, with control." He reached for her hand carefully. "For the first time, I want to stop running." She didn't pull away, but she didn't say anything yet. Instead, she looked back at the letter and read the final lines aloud. "If you're reading this, then I wasn't there when you needed me, but maybe he is, and maybe that's the only apology I can leave you with. Don't let fear keep your heart in silence. Elena, you deserve to be heard. You always did. Love, Mom." She folded the letter slowly and placed it on the desk, the lavender flower beside it. Then, after a long, trembling breath, she looked at Dylan with something different in her eyes. Not just pain, but possibility. "I don't know if I can forgive you," she said. "I'm not asking you to," he replied softly. "Not yet. But I want to believe you," she added. "I want to believe this isn't just guilt, that it's real, that you're not just showing up because you feel obligated." He leaned forward, his voice breaking. "I didn't feel anything for most of my life, Elena. I knew how to win, how to conquer, how to build. But love? I didn't understand it until I saw you holding her. Until I realized that everything I wanted was already walking away from me. I don't want to be the man I was. Not for her. Not for you. Not for me." She stared at him, searching his face, trying to read between the cracks of his words. "You'll have to prove it. Not just to me, but to her." "I will." They sat there in silence, the letter between them like a fragile bridge connecting past to future. Then Haun cried from the other room. Elena stood, but Dylan rose too. "I'll go," he said gently. She didn't argue. She watched as he stepped into the nursery, as he lifted their daughter into his arms with careful hands. She didn't stop crying right away, but he didn't panic. He rocked her slowly, whispering something only she could hear. Elena stood at the doorway. Something in her heart shifted. He didn't move for a long time. He was afraid that if he did, she'd wake. Or worse, that the feeling might disappear. Behind him, Elena watched. She didn't say a word. Not yet. Her arms were crossed, more out of habit than defense. She had spent so many months guarding her heart, learning to survive without warmth, that letting it in again felt dangerous. Still, the sight of Dylan holding their daughter, not with polished confidence but with vulnerability, was softening something inside her. Slowly, carefully, like petals unfolding in the first light of morning. "I used to imagine this," she said quietly, her voice barely carrying over the sound of rain. A home that felt full." He turned slightly, careful not to disturb the baby, and met her gaze. "I never imagined it would be like this," he said, "that it would feel so terrifying, and so right at the same time. You look like you're afraid to breathe," she murmured. "I am," he admitted, his voice low. "She's so small, so new, and I don't know what I'm doing." "You're doing better than you think." He smiled weakly, then looked down at Haun again. "When she looks up at me, it's like she sees something I don't, something good, and I don't know if I deserve that." Elena stepped forward, her eyes softening. "You don't have to deserve it. You just have to show up for it. Every day." "I will," he whispered. "Even if I fail, even if you don't forgive me, I'll still show up." They stood in silence, side by side, both staring at their daughter. The rain deepened outside, as if the sky itself was listening. After a while, Dylan carefully laid Haun back in her crib, adjusting the blanket with trembling hands. Elena watched his every movement, the gentleness, the reverence. He had changed. Not completely, not perfectly, but undeniably. He turned to her, his eyes tired but sincere. "I don't want to just be a visitor in her life," he said. "I don't want to come in and out. I want to be here, for the midnight cries, for the first steps, for her first word, even if it's not Dad." Elena looked at him long and hard. "Do you remember what you said the night I told you I was pregnant?" His face fell. "Yes. You didn't ask if I was okay. You didn't smile. You didn't even look at me." He lowered his gaze. "I was a coward," he said. "I thought if I acted like it didn't matter, it wouldn't change me. But it did. It broke something in you, and in me too." She took a deep breath, her voice steady but full of ache. "I carried our child alone. I gave birth without your hand to hold. I looked into her eyes and wished she could know her father. Really know him. But I also promised myself I wouldn't let her grow up watching a man who only shows up when it's convenient." "I know," he said softly. "That's not who I want to be anymore." Her eyes glistened, but she didn't cry. "Not this time. I'm not asking for a perfect father," she said, "or even a perfect husband. I just need to know you won't disappear again." He stepped forward, his voice shaking. "I won't. I swear to you." Then came a knock at the door. Not sharp, but urgent. They froze. Elena frowned. "Are you expecting someone?" "No," Dylan said immediately. She moved cautiously to the door, opening it just enough to see. A delivery man stood in the rain, holding a large envelope in a plastic sleeve. "Delivery for Ms. Elena Hahn," he said. She took it, confused. "I didn't order anything." But when she looked at the sender information, her breath caught. Park Global Holdings, Legal Division. Her eyes flew to Dylan, who had stepped closer. "Why is your company sending me legal documents?" she asked, her voice sharp. I don't know," he said, genuinely confused. "I haven't been in the office. I told them not to send anything." She tore the envelope open. Inside, a legal document. Contract, custody proposal, and financial settlement. Ms. Elena Hahn and Mr. Dylan Park. She stared at the title, frozen. "What the hell is this?" Dylan grabbed the document, scanning the contents. His face twisted in shock, then horror. "No, this isn't me. I didn't authorize this." "Then how is it here?" she demanded, voice rising. "Minji," he whispered. "My legal team. She must have filed something before I left." Elena stepped back, her chest rising and falling in quick, shallow breaths. "You promised me. You said you were here to stay, not to take her." "I'm not," he said, panicked. "I swear to you, I didn't know this was happening. I would never—" "Elena, look at me, please." Her eyes were glassy now, her hands trembling. "I trusted you," she whispered. "I let you into our home. I read that letter. I started to believe." Dylan stepped forward, trying to take her hands. "I'll fix this. I'll cancel it. I'll call them right now." "No," she said, pulling away. "I need space. Elena, please, leave." He froze. "Just for tonight," she added, softer this time. "I need time to breathe, to think." His throat burned, but he nodded. He gathered his coat in silence and walked to the door. Before leaving, he turned once more. "I don't care what that paper says. I didn't come here for custody. I came to be her father, to love her, to love you." But her back was already turned. The door closed gently behind him. Her chest ached, not just from betrayal but from confusion. She had seen the sincerity in Dylan's eyes, felt it in the way he held Haun, in the way he didn't try to justify himself when she asked him to leave. And still, that envelope, that name, Park Global Holdings, printed in bold at the top. The man she had let in, who had rocked their daughter to sleep with trembling hands, was the same man whose company had just delivered a proposal that outlined visitation schedules, parental rights, and monthly settlements, as if Haun were a business negotiation. She pressed her fingers to her temple, willing her heart to be still. But nothing calmed. Everything burned. The baby cried softly from the nursery. Elena forced herself to stand, walking on unsteady legs to where her daughter lay. She lifted her gently, whispering comfort into the soft night air. "You're okay," she murmured. "Mommy's here." But even as she said it, her voice cracked, because she wasn't sure anymore. She wasn't sure of anything. Outside, under the flickering light of a street lamp, Dylan stood in the rain. He hadn't left. He couldn't. He stood there soaked to the bone, unmoving, watching the dim light in the nursery window. He had tried calling Minji the moment he got outside, but she didn't answer. The office line went straight to voicemail. His hands shook with cold and anger, not at Elena, but at himself, at how easily the past kept reaching out to ruin whatever fragile hope he was trying to build. He pulled out his phone again, dialing for the third time. Finally, she picked up. "Mr. Park, what the hell did you do, Minji?" There was a pause. I thought I was following your instructions. I told you I was stepping back from the legal team, that I'd handle things personally. You also said to prepare for contingencies, she said quietly, to protect your interests, your child's. I told you to trust me. I did, but the board, they were pressuring for action. They thought you'd lost focus, that she might disappear with the child. I was trying to protect you. Dylan let out a breath, slow and heavy. You just cost me everything. I'm sorry. He hung up and stood there, soaked, still. He didn't move for another hour. Not until he saw the light in the nursery turn off. Not until he was sure Haun had fallen asleep. Not until he felt like his legs might give out. Then he left. Not because he wanted to, but because she had asked him to. And this time he would listen. Back inside, Elena rocked Haun in the dark, her thoughts spiraling. Part of her wanted to believe Dylan. Part of her wanted to storm into the city, confront his entire team, demand answers. But another part of her, a deeper, colder part, whispered that this was inevitable. That men like Dylan always protected what mattered on paper first. That love was never enough to undo power. By morning, the storm had passed. The sky was overcast, but quiet. Elena hadn't slept. She sat on the couch, still in the clothes from the night before, the letter from her mother open beside her, the legal document now shredded in the waste bin. A knock came at the door, not loud, not rushed. She opened it slowly. It wasn't Dylan. It was Ji-young, standing perfectly dry beneath a beige trench coat, makeup flawless, eyes hidden behind tinted glasses. Elena froze. "What do you want?" Ji-young removed her sunglasses, her smile tight. "I'm not here to cause trouble. I'm here to clarify things, woman to woman. I don't think there's anything between us that needs clarity. Maybe not, but there is between us and him." Elena didn't answer. Ji-young stepped closer. "Dylan, he's sincere. For now. He believes he's changed. He thinks he's finally found meaning beyond money. And maybe he has. Then why are you here?" "Because you need to understand what comes with him," she said, her voice cool. "He might be trying to be a man worth loving, but the world he built is full of sharks, and they don't care about sincerity. They care about blood. And your daughter? She's next in line." Elena's grip on the door tightened. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying the contract wasn't meant to hurt you. It was meant to protect her. Legally, strategically, from people who won't care that she's a baby. She's already part of a war she didn't ask to be born into. And you think this is supposed to make me trust him more?" "No," Ji-young said. "I think you need to see that love alone won't be enough. You want him to be different. I believe he wants that too. But the world around him hasn't changed. And it never will." She turned to leave, then paused. "One last thing," she added. "He stayed in the rain for hours last night. He didn't know I saw. He didn't move. Just stared at that window." Elena's breath caught. Ji-young looked back over her shoulder. "Men like Dylan don't stand in the rain for anyone." Then she walked away. Elena closed the door slowly, her heart pounding. She stared at the spot where Ji-young had stood, at the waste bin with the torn contract, at the crib where her daughter stirred in her sleep. Men like Dylan don't stand in the rain for anyone. That image haunted her. Dylan, drenched, unmoving, outside her home. It wasn't the grand gesture that unsettled her. It was the quiet desperation behind it. The man who once measured his worth by how quickly he could leave was now staying even when she asked him to go. She hated that part of her believed it. Hated more that part of her wanted to believe it. A soft knock broke the silence again. She turned slowly, expecting him. But when she opened the door, it was Minji. Elena's body stiffened. "I don't think we have anything to talk about," she said flatly. Minji nodded. "You're right. You don't owe me anything. But I owe you an apology." Elena didn't move, one hand still on the doorframe. "Go on." "I authorized the paperwork," Minji said, her voice low, sincere. "It was a contingency plan. Something I submitted before I even knew Dylan had come here. I assumed he'd disappear again. I assumed you'd cut him off and take the baby out of his reach. I was trying to protect him, protect the company. I never imagined he'd change." "You didn't think he was capable of it," Elena said quietly. Minji looked down, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. "No, I didn't." "Neither did I," Elena added after a moment. "And now I don't know what to believe." Minji's eyes lifted. He didn't know about the documents. He was furious. "You need to know that." Elena's gaze didn't waver. "Why are you here, really?" Minji hesitated, then reached into her coat and pulled out a sealed envelope. "This is a notarized cancellation of the custody proposal. Dylan requested it be filed immediately. He told the legal team that if they ever acted without his consent again, they were out." Elena's breath caught. Minji extended the envelope. "He didn't want to come back until you were ready, but he also didn't want you to doubt his choice." Elena took it, fingers trembling slightly. Minji turned to leave, but paused on the porch steps. "For what it's worth," she said softly, "I've worked for him for 10 years. I've seen him destroy competitors, silence opposition, walk out of rooms without a glance back. But I've never seen him stand still. Not once. Until you." And then she was gone. Elena closed the door and stood there, frozen. The sealed envelope in her hands trembled with the weight of meaning. Proof. Evidence. A man who had always used power to control was now using it to release, to give her the right to choose. She walked slowly to the crib. Haun stirred, her tiny fingers curling into fists. Elena watched her for a long time, then bent down and kissed her forehead. "I want to believe in him," she whispered, "but I have to believe in us more." That night she didn't sleep. She sat in the kitchen, staring at the empty chair across from her, remembering the first morning she had tried to make breakfast for Dylan in their old apartment. He hadn't touched it, barely said thank you. She remembered the silence, the ache of it, how long she had clung to hope with bloody fingers. And now he was clinging too. The next morning she didn't call. She didn't send a message. She got dressed, bundled Haun in a warm blanket, and walked to the bus stop under a clear sky. Her heart thudded heavily in her chest with each step. She didn't know what she would say. She only knew she had to see him. When the elevator doors opened at Park Global Holdings, the receptionist looked up, startled to see Elena holding a baby in her arms. "Ms. Han, I'm here to see Dylan." The woman stood, flustered. "He's in a meeting. Tell him it's Elena." Within seconds, doors were opening, voices hushed. Minji appeared, guiding her toward the executive office, eyes wide but silent with respect. Dylan stood behind a long glass table, speaking with board members, charts on the screen behind him. But the moment the door opened and he saw her, his voice caught in his throat. He froze. Everyone turned. Elena stepped into the room, calm but unshakable. "I need a moment with Mr. Park," she said clearly. Some men stood. Some didn't. Minji quickly ushered them out without argument. Silence fell. Dylan looked at her, Haun in her arms. His voice was barely a whisper. "You came. I needed to see for myself," she said. He stepped around the table slowly. "The contract. I know." Minji explained everything. "I have the cancellation." He paused, unsure. She looked at him, her eyes unreadable. "Do you still mean it? Everything you said?" He didn't move closer. He didn't beg. He simply answered, "Yes, and I will keep meaning it." every day, even if you don't come back, even if it takes years, even if you never forgive me. Her grip tightened slightly on the blanket around Haun. I'm not here to forgive you, she said. His breath caught. I'm here to see if we still fit in the same room. She stepped closer. I'm not ready to go back to the life we had, she continued. That woman is gone, the one who waited quietly for your love. But the woman I've become, she's stronger, she's louder, and if you want her in your life, you don't lead. You walk beside her. He nodded slowly, emotion rising in his eyes. I'll walk wherever you lead, he said. She studied him. Then she held out Haun. Start with this. He reached for her, arms steady now. He took the baby into his chest, holding her as if she were made of stars. His chin trembled as he looked into her face. She looks at me like I'm not a stranger anymore, he whispered. That's because you're not, Elena said, her voice soft. Not if you stay. The room was still. The city beyond the windows roared quietly in the background, but none of it touched them. Only the sound of their daughter's tiny breath. I'm not ready to go back to the life we had. Of course she wasn't. Neither was he. That life was dead. But something else had begun to grow in its place. Slowly, painfully, but undeniably. And with each breath Haun took, curled against him like a secret, Dylan felt it pressing into his soul. The cost of the man he had been. He gently handed the baby to Minji, who was waiting just outside the boardroom. Arms ready, eyes glistening with something that looked almost like guilt. I'll make sure she's safe until the car arrives, Minji said softly. He nodded in thanks, running a hand through his hair as the doors closed behind her. Then he stood there, alone. He didn't realize how much time had passed until his phone lit up with a name he hadn't seen in over a year. Daniel Seo, an old friend. Once his right hand in college, now a gossip columnist working with a tabloid that thrived on scandal and personal ruin. Dylan hesitated, then answered. Daniel. Well, look who's alive, Daniel said with a tone that was far too amused. I've been trying to reach you for days. Make it quick. Oh, this'll be quick, Daniel replied, his voice dropping. You might want to prepare for a storm, Dylan. There's a leak. Someone's feeding information to the press about your daughter. About Elena, the pregnancy, the separation, everything. Dylan's breath stopped cold. What are you talking about? A journalist reached out to me, hoping I'd confirm details. They're preparing an expose. They claim your legal team filed for custody behind Elena's back, that your company tried to hide it. There are even whispers that Elena ran away from you to protect the baby. It's going to paint you like a monster. His stomach dropped. Who leaked it? My guess. Daniel sighed. Someone inside. A board member who wants your seat. Or maybe your former fiancé. Ji-young's name has been floating around for months. She's been getting cozy with investors ever since you disappeared from the spotlight. Dylan's hand tightened into a fist. I'll stop it. You can't, Daniel said. The story's already moving. What you can do is get ahead of it. Go public. Tell your side before they make you the villain in a story you didn't write. Dylan hung up without a word. He paced the room, the walls closing in tighter with every step. He wasn't afraid for himself. His image could burn. His company could crash. But if Haun's face, Elena's name, ended up splattered across tabloids, no amount of apology could take that back. He had promised Elena he would protect them. Now, someone was using the truth as a weapon. He picked up the phone again. This time, he called Elena. It rang once, twice, then, Dylan. Her voice was cautious, but not cold. There's something you need to know, he said, trying to keep his voice steady. There's a story. Someone's leaking things. About us. About Haun. There was silence on the other end. Then a breath. How much do they know? Too much. Do they have photos? Her voice dropped to a whisper. Of her. I don't know. But if they do, it's only the beginning. Her silence felt like glass shattering. This is why I left, she whispered. Why I didn't want her to grow up in your world. Because in your world, love is a weakness. and children are collateral. No, he said quickly. That's not true anymore. That's why I left that world for you. For her. But it followed us, she said. Even here. He closed his eyes. I'll fix it. How? I'll speak to the press. I'll admit everything. I'll take the blame. I'll draw all the attention to me and away from you and Haun. You'll ruin your career. I don't care, he said. There's nothing left to protect except the two of you. She was quiet again. I'm scared, Dylan. I know. Me too. But I believe you, she said, her voice shaking now. And that scares me even more. He felt something crack inside him. Elena, I want to believe we can have something that doesn't break every time the wind changes. But I can't protect her if you're at war with the people closest to you. I'm not at war, he said, jaw tight. Not anymore. I'm just done letting silence write my story. He could hear her breathing. Slow, uncertain, but real. Then tell the truth, she said. Tell them what you've done, what you regret, who you want to be. I will. I'll be watching, she whispered. But not for you, for her. He nodded, even though she couldn't see it. I understand. That night, Dylan stood on the balcony of his penthouse and drafted a public statement with his own hands. No PR team, no lawyers, just him raw and exposed. He admitted to his past neglect. To the legal filing he didn't stop in time. To the woman he loved, who walked away not because she wanted to, but because she had to protect a child he hadn't yet earned the right to hold. And he ended it with a single sentence that felt like the first truth he'd ever told in public. I am no longer protecting my legacy. I am protecting my family. Then he sent it. The fallout came fast. Headlines exploded. Tycoon admits to failing wife and child. Dylan Park issues public apology amid scandal. From power to penance. A billionaire's reckoning. He watched it all unfold from his living room. Alone. As the city buzzed in judgment. But somewhere, in a quiet house miles away, Elena held their daughter close and read every word. 'Cause Elena hadn't called. She hadn't sent a message. Not a word. He didn't blame her. He wasn't expecting applause. Still, he waited. Every minute dragged like an hour. He kept the volume low on the news reports and refused every interview request. What could he say that he hadn't already written in those 378 words? I failed the woman I loved. I nearly lost the daughter I didn't deserve. I am not seeking sympathy. I am asking for accountability. By the end of the second day, Dylan found himself back in the nursery. Not the one at Elena's house, but the one he had prepared in secret months ago, before everything had fallen apart. Before she left, he hadn't shown it to anyone. He had only opened the door once since she disappeared. It still smelled faintly of cedarwood and baby powder. The crib was pristine, untouched. A small white onesie folded neatly on the changing table, still with its tag. The soft mobile above the bed, shaped like little clouds and stars, hung silently in the dim light. He stood in the doorway, leaning against the frame, arms crossed tightly. And then, behind him, he heard the elevator chime. He turned quickly, heart pounding. Footsteps, slow, hesitant. The door opened, and there she was, Elena, holding Haun in her arms, bundled in a soft pink blanket. She looked tired, pale, but her eyes were steady. He didn't say a word. Neither did she. She walked in slowly, her eyes scanning the apartment like it was unfamiliar territory. Her gaze landed on the nursery door behind him, and then back to his face. I read your statement, she said finally. He nodded, unable to trust his voice. It was honest. I meant every word. I know, she said softer now. That's why I'm here. He stepped aside, and she walked slowly toward the nursery. He followed behind her in silence. When she entered, she stopped just past the threshold, her breath catching slightly. She turned to look at him. You built this. I started before I even knew she was a girl, he said quietly. I told the contractor to make it neutral. I thought if I didn't get too personal, it wouldn't hurt when you left. She looked at the room again. But you kept building it. He nodded. Because part of me never gave up, even when I should have. She stepped forward, gently laying Haun in the crib for the first time. The baby stirred but didn't wake. Her little fingers curled and uncurled. Elena stood over her, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "I don't know what this is yet," she whispered, "or what it could be." Dylan swallowed hard. "It doesn't have to be anything today. It just has to be real." She turned to him, her voice trembling. "I was so angry, so tired. I used to cry in the shower so she wouldn't hear me. I hated how much I still wanted you to show up. I wanted to," he whispered. "I just didn't know how." "Well, you've started now," she said. "And that matters." He looked at her, eyes wet. "You matter." Elena's gaze softened. "So do you. You always did. You just couldn't see it." A long silence passed between them, heavy with the weight of things not said and the fragile hope that maybe, not today, not tomorrow, but someday, they might become something new. She stepped closer, and then, without warning, she reached for his hand. He held it like it was something sacred, like if he let go, the whole world might collapse again. "I'm not promising anything," she said. "I don't need a promise," he replied. "Just let me earn today." She nodded slowly. "You have it." They stood there, side by side, watching their daughter sleep in the room he had built with a heart that was once too closed to love, and a soul now stripped bare. And for the first time, there were no lies between them, only truth and breath. Elena sat on the edge of the armchair near the crib, watching Haun breathe. The baby's chest rose and fell with a rhythm so gentle it barely seemed real. Dylan sat across from her on the floor, knees pulled up, hands loosely clasped, his eyes never leaving Elena's face. Neither of them spoke for a long time, but the silence didn't feel like before. It didn't feel like avoidance. It felt like presence. Finally, Elena broke the quiet. "You know, I used to imagine what it would feel like to be in this room with you, with her. I'd picture it late at night, when I was still pregnant and couldn't sleep." Dylan looked up at her, listening without interruption. "And in those dreams, you were always smiling," she continued. "You'd lift her in your arms, twirl her around, and I'd laugh. Felt easy, natural, like we were a family." He swallowed, voice rough when he finally answered. "I dreamed of that too, but in mine you were already gone. I was holding her alone, and she kept crying, and I couldn't make her stop. I didn't know how." Elena looked at him then, her eyes softer than before, but full of unspoken ache. "Maybe we were dreaming opposite sides of the same truth." He leaned back, exhaling deeply. "And now we're here, awake." "Yes," she said quietly. "And the real version isn't neat or warm or full of laughter. It's just this. Two broken people and a baby between them." He smiled faintly, just for a second. "She's the only thing that doesn't feel broken. She saved me," Elena said, "when I thought I had nothing left." "She saved me too," he said, "but I was too ashamed to admit it." There was a pause. Then, Dylan reached for something behind him, a small, worn box. He slid it gently across the floor toward her. Elena looked down at it, confused. "I didn't want to give you this before," he said. "Not when it could have felt like a bribe or a trap. But now, I just want you to have it, because it's always been yours." She hesitated, then slowly opened the lid. Inside was a delicate silver bracelet, small, elegant, with a single charm in the shape of a flower. Her hand covered her mouth. "I saw you looking at it in that market," Dylan said softly. "Months before we were married. You didn't know I noticed. I thought you forgot everything back then." "I didn't forget," he whispered. "I just buried everything that mattered under what didn't." Her fingers brushed over the charm, and for a moment, she couldn't speak. Her throat tightened, emotion flooding her chest. "Why now?" she finally asked. "Because I need you to know that I saw you," he said. "Even when I was too broken to show it. I saw you loving me, waiting, believing in someone who didn't believe in himself." She blinked rapidly, tears threatening. "You should have said something. I didn't know how, but now I do." And if you let me, I'll never stop saying it again. She set the box aside, wiping her eyes. Then she looked at him, really looked at him. Not as the man she'd left or the father trying to prove himself, but as someone human, cracked in places she now recognized in herself. "You're changing," she said. He nodded. "Because I want to, not for you, not even for her, but because for the first time I want to stay. I want to be whole." She rose slowly and walked over to him, kneeling in front of him, their faces inches apart. "You're going to make mistakes. I know. I'm going to be scared. I'll be patient. I'm not promising forever," she whispered. "I'm not asking for it," he whispered back. "Just tomorrow, and the day after." She leaned forward then, forehead resting against his, breath shaking. "I don't know if this is the right thing," she said. "Maybe it's not," he said. "Maybe it's just the true thing." They stayed like that, forehead to forehead, their daughter breathing softly in the background. An anchor, a witness, a reason. And somewhere deep in the middle of that quiet night, with no vows or fanfare or absolution, something settled between them. Not closure, but opening. A fragile, flickering beginning. The kind that's easy to overlook. The kind people spend lifetimes hoping to find again. And neither of them dared move. "I made it how you like," he said. "Ginger, no sugar." She looked up, blinking as if she'd been pulled out of a deep thought. A small, surprised smile touched her lips. "You remembered?" "I remembered everything, Elena," he said quietly, handing her the cup. "I just didn't know how to hold on to it back then." She took it from him, their fingers brushing. That brief touch made something catch in both their chests, but neither said anything about it. They sat in silence, sipping slowly. The world outside their window stirred. Horns, chatter, footsteps. But in that small room, the air was sacred. Still, after a while, Elena spoke. "I talked to my sister last night." He looked over at her, unsure of what that meant. She saw the statement, called me crying, said she never thought she'd see your name next to the word truth. He exhaled slowly. "Neither did I." "She asked if I was really considering letting you back in," Elena said, setting her mug down on the window ledge. "And I told her I didn't know, but something changed in me after reading what you wrote. Something I hadn't felt in a long time." "What was it?" he asked softly. She turned to him. "Trust." He looked down, overwhelmed. "That's more than I thought I'd ever get again." "You haven't earned all of it yet," she added gently. "But you've given me something to hold on to. That's not nothing." He nodded slowly, eyes shimmering. But then her expression shifted, more serious, cautious. "I need to ask you something," she said, "and I need you to be honest." He straightened, bracing himself. "Anything. That night, when I told you I was pregnant, you didn't even blink. You barely said a word. But later, when I left, I found something in the drawer beside your bed. A folded page. Your handwriting." He froze. Her voice lowered. "You wrote a letter to someone about the baby, about your fear. You never gave it to me." He closed his eyes, remembering. "I couldn't," he said. "I wrote it after you fell asleep. I was lying beside you, staring at the ceiling, feeling like the ground had just opened up under me. I wanted to tell you everything I felt, but I couldn't speak. So I wrote it, and then I hid it." "Why?" "Because if I gave it to you, it would have made it real," he said. "And I didn't know how to be a father. I didn't know how to be enough." Elena's eyes welled, but she didn't cry. "I wasn't asking you to be perfect, Dylan. I was just asking you to be present." "I know that now," he said, "and I hate that I only learned it after losing you." She looked away, breathing deeply. "I want to move forward," she said, "but we have to be honest about what we both did. I left without giving you a chance to change. I took our daughter and disappeared." "You were right too," he said immediately. "I gave you no reason to stay. But I also didn't fight for you," she whispered, "because I didn't believe you were capable of becoming someone else." He reached for her hand, gently curling his fingers around hers. Then let's stop surviving in regret. Let's build from what's left. She looked down at their hands, interlocked like they used to be, familiar and yet new. I don't want to rush this, she said. I'm not ready to move back in, or make promises we can't keep. I understand, he said. No rushing, no pressure, just one moment at a time. And maybe, she added, glancing at him, if you're serious about being part of her life, then you should spend a day with her, alone. His eyes widened slightly. Alone? Yes, she said. Just the two of you. No me to translate her cries. No me to guide your hands. You say you're ready to be her father. Let's see. Dylan hesitated for a moment, and then nodded. I'll do it. Her lips curved into the smallest smile. Good, because tomorrow's Saturday, and I could use a few hours to myself. He laughed softly, nerves clear in his voice. What if I mess it up? You will, she said without hesitation. Everyone does. But if you're still standing when I get back, we'll call it a win. And then, for the first time in months, they laughed. Together. It was short, unsure, but real. And as they stood in that warm morning light, watching the baby sleep, they both knew something had shifted again. Not in the world, not even in their relationship, but inside themselves. And for the first time, the idea of a tomorrow didn't feel impossible. Felt like a door, half open. She likes it slightly warm, Elena reminded him, slipping on her shoes. Test it on your wrist first. He looked up, nervously. Right? Warm, not hot. And don't forget her blanket if you take her for a walk. Even if it seems sunny, she always gets cold. Blanket. Got it. She walked over, glancing at him with a raised brow. You okay? He let out a breath that sounded almost like a laugh, but it cracked in the middle. I feel like I'm preparing for an exam I never studied for. You'll do fine, she said, more confidently than she felt. She likes you. She doesn't know me yet. Elena tilted her head, stepping closer. Maybe not fully, but she recognizes something. Trust begins with rhythm, breath, familiar presence. You've been showing up. He looked down at the bottle, then at her. What if she cries and I can't figure out why? Then you breathe, she said, and you stay. That's more important than fixing anything. He nodded, slowly, committing her words to memory like a vow. She walked over to the crib and kissed Haun gently on the forehead. I'll only be a few hours, she whispered. When she turned back, Dylan was standing there, wide-eyed, like a man about to be handed a treasure he didn't believe he was worthy of. She smiled and reached for the diaper bag. Here, everything you need is inside. Extra clothes, wipes, bottles. You'll be okay. He took the bag and slung it over his shoulder like a soldier heading to battle. Elena paused at the door. Call me if anything feels wrong. I won't let anything happen to her, he said quickly. I know, she replied, and for the first time she meant it. Then she left. The apartment felt different the moment the door clicked shut. Quieter, heavier. Dylan stood frozen for a second, staring at Haun sleeping peacefully in her crib, completely unaware that her mother had walked out and left her in the hands of a man still learning how to be more than a name on a birth certificate. He approached slowly, like she might break if he made a wrong move. Okay, he whispered, crouching down beside the crib. Just you and me now. Her eyes fluttered open, and she stared at him for a moment, unfazed, curious. Then she wriggled and let out a soft squeak that barely qualified as a cry. He smiled, nerves softening a little. All right, 1 point for Dad. He lifted her carefully, supporting her head the way Elena had shown him. She nestled against his chest, warm and small, and he felt his whole world reduced to the sound of her breath and the rise and fall of her body against his. The hours moved in fragments. He changed her diaper, took 3 tries. He fed her, spilled formula down his shirt. He rocked her when she cried, unsure if it was gas or boredom or just the mystery of baby emotions. By noon, she had fallen asleep on his chest, and he sat completely still on the couch, terrified to move. He looked down at her, at the gentle flutter of her eyelashes. The tiny fingers curled against his shirt, and in that stillness, he felt something rise in his throat. Unexpected, sharp, but familiar. Grief, not the loud kind, the quiet kind. The kind that comes from realizing how much time you lost. How many moments passed while you were too blind to see their worth. He rested his cheek against her soft head. "I should have been there," he whispered. "For your first breath. For her tears. For the nights she stayed up wondering if I'd ever change." His voice broke. "I wasn't a man anyone could count on. Not her. Not you." His arms tightened just slightly around her, as if that might anchor the words. "But I'm here now," he said, "and I'm not going anywhere." He didn't realize he was crying until one of his tears landed on her blanket. She stirred, but didn't wake. "I'm sorry," he whispered, "for all the days you waited, for all the ways I made her feel alone." And for the first time, he felt the full weight of fatherhood. Not in the feedings or the diapers or the soft coos, but in the ache of everything he almost missed. When Elena returned, she didn't knock. She let herself in quietly. The apartment was dim, the curtains drawn just enough to keep the light soft. She heard nothing, no crying, no chaos. She tiptoed toward the living room and stopped at the edge of the doorway. Dylan was asleep on the couch, his head tilted to the side, mouth slightly open. His arms were cradling Haun, who rested peacefully on his chest, her tiny hand clutching a wrinkle of his shirt. Something in Elena broke, not with pain, with love, but the kind of love that comes after everything. After the anger, after the leaving, after the silence. She moved forward, quietly kneeling beside them. He stirred, eyes fluttering open. She smiled softly. "Hey!" He blinked, confused for a second. Then relief. "She didn't cry much," he said, voice hoarse. "We figured it out." She looked at the two of them. "You did good. I just tried to stay present," he said. "Like you told me." Elena leaned in and pressed her lips gently to Haun's head. Then, slowly, she reached for Dylan's hand. "Thank you." "For what?" "For not just holding her," she said, voice trembling. "But for seeing her." He didn't answer. He just held her hand tighter. And in that small space between heartbeats and baby breaths, they all existed. Not as a broken family, not as fragments of regret, but as something whole. Elena sat beside Dylan, both of them watching Haun sleep in her crib again. The silence between them wasn't tense. It wasn't full of fear or uncertainty anymore, but it was charged with questions that still needed asking, with truths still sitting heavy in their chests. She looked over at him slowly. "I saw her today," she said. He didn't look at her, but his posture shifted. "Ji Young." Elena nodded. He rubbed a hand over his face, sighing. "What did she say?" "She wanted me to know she's not finished." He turned sharply, meeting her eyes now. "What does that mean?" Elena's voice was steady, but her eyes were tired. "She knows about the nursery, the press statement. She knows we've been seeing each other again." Dylan's jaw clenched. "How?" She said, "People talk. That when a man like you suddenly stops showing up at galas and starts buying baby formula instead of champagne, the world notices." He stood and began pacing slowly, one hand in his hair, the other clenched at his side. "She's not going to stop until she's taken everything." "She doesn't want everything, Dylan," Elena said softly. "She wants you, or rather, the version of you she still believes exists." He turned to her, eyes wide with something between guilt and frustration. "That version's dead." "I know," she replied, "but she doesn't." He ran a hand along the edge of the crib and leaned forward, voice quieter now. "She was a part of the life I built before I knew what a life was supposed to be. She was safe, convenient. Our relationship made sense on paper. We didn't ask each other for anything real." Elena didn't interrupt. "I thought love was something that looked good in a photo," he said. "But with you, it was never easy. And I ran from that. From you. Because you saw things in me I didn't want to admit were there." He turned to her again, his voice lower, more vulnerable. She's not the threat, Elena. My silence, my distance, my fear. That's what tore us apart. Elena stood and walked over to him. You're not that man anymore, but that doesn't mean we're safe. He nodded slowly. So what do we do? She looked at him carefully. We stop hiding. His brows pulled together. What are you saying? I'm saying we step into the world as a family. We stop letting whispers decide our narrative. We don't need a headline to protect us, Dylan. We need truth. He studied her. You're willing to stand in the spotlight again? I'm willing, she said, voice firm. If you are. He looked toward the window, the skyline fading into amber. She won't like it, he murmured. She'll try to twist it, Elena agreed. But let her, because this time I'm not the same woman I was either, and I'm not afraid of her, or of your past. He smiled faintly, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. She once told me I'd never find someone who'd love me without conditions. And maybe she was right back then, Elena said softly. But people change. You've changed. His voice cracked. Have I really? Enough. She reached up and touched his face, her thumb brushing just under his eye. You held our daughter today like she was your entire world. You looked at her like you knew what it meant to stay. That's enough for today. And tomorrow we'll see. He leaned into her touch, closing his eyes. I want to be the man you believe I can be. You already are, she whispered. You just have to stop looking for permission. They stood in silence, forehead to forehead, the shadows of the room stretching longer around them. Somewhere outside, the world kept spinning. Whispers would rise again, headlines would come, but in that fragile moment, nothing could touch them. Then Haun stirred in the crib, letting out a soft cry. Elena moved first, but Dylan stopped her gently, stepping forward. I've got her, he said. She watched him bend, lift their daughter into his arms like he'd done it 100 times. He didn't fumble this time, didn't question himself. He held her with the confidence of a father who knew who he was becoming. And as he rocked her softly, whispering quiet words only a father could say, Elena sat back down, tears welling in her eyes. Not from sadness, not even from joy, but from something deeper. Peace. A peace she never thought she'd feel in this space again. And in the distance, almost imperceptible, a new storm was brewing. Rumors, assumptions, whispers of legal retaliation, accusations of manipulation and staged sincerity. And worst of all, the name at the bottom of the column. Jiyoung Seo. Dylan stepped into the kitchen, dressed simply in a white shirt and jeans, barefoot, holding a bottle of milk. He froze when he saw the paper in front of her. I saw it, he said softly. Elena didn't answer. She must have gone to one of the publishers I worked with before, he continued. She knows exactly how to plant seeds. It's not the whole truth, but it's just enough to make people doubt. People already doubt, Elena replied, her voice calm but thin. This just gives them more reason. Dylan placed the bottle on the counter, running a hand through his hair. I'm sorry. She finally looked up. Stop apologizing. We're past apologies, Dylan. He paused, the weight of her words settling in. You're right. She folded the paper slowly, setting it aside, and stood. I need to know something, she said, and I need the truth, no matter how much it hurts. He braced himself. Anything. When you were with her, Elena began, voice trembling just slightly. Did you ever tell her you loved her? Dylan's breath caught. He looked away, jaw tightening. Yes, he said. Once. Elena's eyes darkened, but she didn't flinch. I thought I meant it at the time, he continued, swallowing hard. But it wasn't real. It was control, comfort. It was what I thought love was supposed to look like. She wanted someone powerful, and I wanted someone who didn't ask questions. That wasn't love. It was a transaction. Elena looked down, her fingers tightening into fists. He stepped forward, gently reaching for her hand. But with you, his voice cracked. I didn't even know I was in love until you were already halfway out the door. And by then, I'd buried so much of myself, I didn't even recognize who I'd become. She let him hold her hand, but her eyes were distant. She's not going to stop, is she? No, he said. She's going to keep twisting the truth until something breaks. Then we have to be ready, she said, lifting her chin. Not just for us, but for her. For Haun. He nodded slowly. I spoke to my lawyer this morning, he said. Jiyoung filed an injunction. She's claiming a conflict of interest, that my parenting decisions are affecting the board's confidence. Elena stared at him. Is that legal? She's not trying to win in court, Dylan said. She's trying to wear us down in public. And what happens if the board believes her? His silence was the answer. You could lose the company, she whispered. I could lose everything, he said. But I won't lose you again. Not her. Not this. Elena exhaled slowly and stepped closer to him. Then we fight. Not in the shadows. Not with fear. If she wants war, we give her truth. Dylan met her eyes. You really mean that? I do. A soft cry came from the nursery. Elena turned instinctively, but Dylan caught her hand. I've got her, he said. You've done enough. Let me do this. She hesitated, then nodded. All right. He disappeared down the hallway, and she watched him go, her chest aching. Not from fear, but from the weight of finally not having to carry everything alone. Moments later, he returned, Haun in his arms. She blinked up sleepily at Elena and reached out a tiny hand. Dylan smiled. She always wants you. She knows my voice, Elena said with a small laugh. But she's learning mine, he whispered. They sat down together, the baby nestled between them, both their hands resting protectively around her. I don't know what the next few days will look like, he said. But I know this, if we let her write the story, we lose. If we write it ourselves, no matter how messy, we win. Elena looked down at their daughter, then up at him. Then let's write it, she said. Together. And just as the evening settled in, the shadows stretching long across the room, something shifted again. This time not with silence, but with strength. Not the strength of two people pretending to be whole. To fight. He glanced down the hallway where soft murmurs drifted from the nursery. Elena was talking to Haun, her voice light, warm, full of something he used to think he'd never deserve. That sound steadied him more than anything else. When he finally stepped into the nursery, Elena was buttoning up the baby's cardigan, speaking to her as if she understood every word. Daddy's going to be very brave today, isn't he? She said gently. He's going to speak the truth, even if it shakes. Haun gurgled and kicked her feet. Dylan smiled faintly. How did she sleep? Better than me, Elena replied, standing. Her eyes swept over him slowly. You look like the version of you I first fell for, before the suits started feeling like armor. He hesitated. Do I still look like him? She stepped closer and adjusted the knot on his tie. No, she said. You look better now. You look real. He breathed in, deep and shaky. She's going to be there, Elena. Jiyoung. She's called an emergency meeting. She wants a vote to strip me of my voting power. Elena's hand stilled at his chest. Are you ready for that? I'm ready for anything except losing you again. Her eyes flickered with something, fear maybe, but also pride. We'll be waiting here, she said, no matter how it goes. He looked over at Haun, who had now managed to shove a sock halfway into her mouth. I need her to grow up knowing that silence isn't strength, he whispered. That real men own their mistakes. That love is something you build, not something you expect. She'll know, Elena said, because she'll see it in you. He nodded slowly, then leaned down, kissed his daughter's forehead, and whispered, I love you, my girl, more than anything. And then, without another word, he turned and walked out the door. The boardroom was a cold contrast to the nursery's warmth. Polished wood, stainless steel, faces too practiced to reveal anything. Jiyoung sat at the far end, calm and poised, her hair tucked neatly behind one ear. Her expression was unreadable, but her eyes gleamed with calculation. Dylan entered and took his seat at the head of the table. Whispers stirred. He didn't speak right away. He looked at every single person in that room. People he'd built empires with. People he once admired, feared, or ignored. Finally, he spoke. "I'm not here to defend myself." A ripple passed through the table. "I'm not here to rewrite what's been said about me, or to sanitize my mistakes," he continued. "Most of you have known me for years. You know I was brilliant, strategic, and, let's be honest, brutal." He let the silence sit. "But somewhere along the way, I forgot that leadership isn't built on power. It's built on responsibility. And I failed in mine, not just as a CEO, but as a man." Jiyoung leaned forward. "And you think admitting it will stop what's coming?" "No," Dylan replied evenly. "I don't expect anything from this room, except the opportunity to say what's true." He stood, pushing back his chair slowly. "For years, I thought building a legacy meant growing numbers, expanding influence, crushing anything in my way. But what kind of legacy leaves your wife in tears and your daughter without a father?" A silence deeper than tension fell across the boardroom. "I walked away because I needed to learn what matters. And I've learned, not from balance sheets or contracts, but from a woman who deserved better, and a child who saved me." Jiyoung scoffed softly. "So what now, Dylan? You want us to believe this is your redemption arc? That love has softened the beast?" He looked directly at her. "No," he said. "I want you to believe that the man who built this company can also rebuild it with integrity, with transparency. I don't need to be CEO to lead. I only need to be the man my daughter will be proud of." He reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope. "I'm proposing we restructure. I'll remain as an advisor. No voting rights, no executive power. I'll train my successor, and I'll stay out of the press. But I won't disappear. Not because I want control, but because I still care about the people in this room." Gasps, murmurs, shock. Jiyoung's expression flickered for the first time. "You're giving it up?" she asked, voice lower now. "I'm choosing what matters," Dylan said. "And this company, it can't keep carrying the weight of who I used to be." The room was still. Then one by one, the board members nodded. Some slowly, some hesitantly, but it was enough. Jiyoung didn't speak again. She sat back, eyes narrowing. And Dylan walked out of the room with his head held high. Not because he won, but because he didn't run. When he returned to the apartment, Elena was in the living room with Haun lying on her chest, asleep again. She looked up the moment the door opened, and when she saw his face, exhausted, bare, but at peace, she stood. "What happened?" "I gave it up," he said. "The position, the vote, all of it." Elena blinked. "You walked away?" "I chose us." And then, without hesitation, she stepped into him. He wrapped his arms around her, and she leaned her head against his shoulder, the weight of all the unknowns still ahead resting quietly between them. "You didn't lose," she whispered. "Not lighter, not yet, but quieter, the kind of quiet that follows after a storm. Not because everything is whole, but because everything is still standing." Dylan sat on the couch with Haun asleep on his chest again, her tiny breath matching the rhythm of his own. Elena was nearby, folding a small pile of baby clothes on the table, her movements calm and methodical, but her eyes kept drifting toward him. It had only been hours since he walked away from the company, and yet he looked unburdened. Worn down, yes, but something about him seemed more present. Like this man cradling their daughter in a quiet room was finally real. She broke the silence first. "I thought I'd feel more afraid," she said softly. Dylan looked up. "Afraid of what?" "That you'd regret it. That after the dust settled, you'd start blaming me for everything you gave up." He shook his head slowly. "No, I didn't lose anything today that truly mattered. What I gave up, I never really owned. But what I almost lost, you, her, that would have been forever." Elena put down the folded onesie and walked toward him. "She'll never understand the choice you made today. Not fully." "I know," he said, looking down at Haun's peaceful face. "But maybe she won't have to." Maybe she'll just feel it, in the way I hold her, in the way I stay. Elena sat beside him, her voice quieter now. I kept waiting for the day when you'd come to your senses and show up like the man I always saw in you. But I stopped waiting eventually. I let that version of you go. You had to, he said, not as a defense, but as an acknowledgement. But the version that walked through the door today, she paused. He's not the man I hoped for. He's more, because he chose this, not out of guilt, not out of desperation, but because you finally saw us. Dylan blinked back, the emotion swelling in his chest. I saw everything too late, Elena. Every time I ignored your voice. Every night I chose silence over affection. Every day you cried and I pretended not to notice. I don't need an apology anymore, she said. I need a partner. You have one, he said quickly. From now on, every diaper, every fever, every sleepless night, I'm there, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. Elena looked at him, and something broke open in her. Not pain, not fear, something warmer. She reached out and touched his cheek, slowly, her thumb brushing along the edge of his jaw where a tear had escaped without permission. Do you think we'll ever go back to the way we were? She asked. He closed his eyes. I hope not, he said. She blinked, surprised. I hope we don't go back, he clarified, because what we were wasn't whole. It was survival, distance. Now this, it's raw, it's messy, but it's honest. I'd rather have the hard truth than the illusion of peace. Elena leaned forward, resting her forehead against his. No more illusions, she whispered. No more disappearing, he answered. Haun stirred slightly between them, letting out a sleepy sigh that made them both smile. They sat like that for a long time, wrapped in silence, in forgiveness, in something that didn't need words to be understood. Eventually, Dylan looked at her again. I want to build something for her. Not a legacy, not a fortune. A life, a place where she feels safe, where she knows love because she sees it, not just hears it. Elena nodded. We'll build it together. And we won't pretend anymore, he said. When we're scared, when we're tired, when we're angry, we speak. We show up, even when it's uncomfortable. She smiled through the tears. You're really staying. I never left, he whispered. I just didn't know how to be seen. She leaned in then, slowly, and pressed her lips to his. Not with urgency, not with passion, but with recognition. A quiet kiss that said, we're not finished. We're just beginning. When she pulled back, she said the words he hadn't expected to hear so soon. Come home. He froze, eyes wide. She placed a hand over his heart. Not just to the house, she clarified. To me, to her, to the family we are becoming. He nodded slowly. His voice cracked. I'm already there. And in that moment, beneath the soft glow of the city and the breath of a sleeping child, they knew. Not all stories are about how love begins. Elena stirred first, blinking against the gray light filtering through the curtains. For a moment, she forgot where she was, until she turned and saw Dylan asleep on the edge of the bed, one hand curled protectively on the mattress between them, his hair a mess, breathing even. She smiled, barely. Then she heard Haun's little whimper through the baby monitor. She started to move, but Dylan was already up, eyes still heavy with sleep. I got her, he mumbled. No, it's okay. I got her, he said again, firmer, and left the room before she could argue. She sat up slowly, letting herself feel the comfort of that small act. It wasn't grand. It wasn't dramatic, but it meant more than any speech. He didn't just stay. He was present. By the time she walked into the kitchen, Dylan had already fed Haun and placed her in the rocker near the window. She was babbling softly to herself, occasionally reaching out toward the rain-covered glass. Dylan was in the kitchen, sleeves rolled up, making coffee. Elena leaned on the doorframe and watched him. You're getting too good at this, she said. He glanced over, grinning sleepily. She only spit up on me once today. I call that a win. She laughed softly and walked over to the rocker, crouching beside their daughter. She looked so peaceful. she whispered. I still don't know how she does it. Just sleeps through everything, like the world doesn't touch her. Maybe because it doesn't, Dylan said from behind her. Because we're here now, together. Elena turned her head, and he was holding out a cup of coffee. She took it, brushing her fingers against his. There was a moment, then a knock shattered it. They both froze. A slow, hesitant knock. 3 times. Dylan's expression shifted. He set his cup down and walked toward the door. Elena stood, instantly alert. When he opened it, Ji-young stood on the other side. Drenched. No umbrella. No makeup. Just a thin coat, soaked through, and hollow eyes. Elena's breath caught. Ji-young looked up at Dylan and forced a small smile. Can I come in? Dylan didn't move. Why are you here? I needed to see it, she said, her voice soft, almost broken. I needed to know if it was real. You saw the photos, Elena said, stepping beside him. You printed the headlines. Ji-young's eyes flicked to her. Those were business. This is personal. Funny, Elena replied. I used to think the same thing, until you tried to rip our lives apart. I was angry, Ji-young whispered. I felt like everything I helped him build was suddenly nothing. You helped him build a company, Elena said. I helped him build a home. I see that now, Ji-young murmured. Dylan stepped forward, his voice steady but quiet. What do you want, Ji-young? She looked at him, really looked, and for the first time there was no defiance, no pride. Closure, she said. And to tell you I'm stepping away. Both Dylan and Elena stiffened. What do you mean? He asked cautiously. I rescinded the injunction. I withdrew the motion to remove your voting rights. I'm resigning from the board. Elena's lips parted slightly in shock. Why? Dylan asked. Because I don't want to be the villain in this story anymore, Ji-young whispered. And because, for the first time, I realized I was holding on to a version of you that never existed. She looked at Elena, eyes red now. You were right. I wanted the man who didn't ask questions, who didn't feel, because he couldn't leave me if he never opened his heart in the first place. And now, Elena asked gently. I'm letting go, Ji-young said. And I just wanted to say, I'm sorry, for the headlines, for the silence, for everything. Dylan stepped back slowly. Thank you, he said, for coming. But there's nothing here for you anymore. I know, she whispered. That's why I can finally leave. She turned and walked down the hallway without another word. When the door closed, silence hung heavy. Elena looked at Dylan. She really let go, she said softly. She had to, he replied, just like we did. He turned to her, and for the first time in days, his shoulders dropped. No more lawsuits, he whispered. No more press. No more shadows. Just us. He nodded. She walked toward him, wrapping her arms around his waist, resting her head against his chest. He held her back, gently, fully, as Haun giggled in the background, reaching up toward the window as if she felt the shift in the air. Outside, the rain slowed. Inside, something healed. Not all at once, but enough. And for the first time, they didn't feel like they were standing on the edge of something fragile. Elena watched him from the doorway, arms crossed loosely, a soft towel in her hands. She had just finished folding laundry, but something about his silence made her stop. He hadn't moved for several minutes, just stared at the box like it held 1,000 conversations he was still afraid to have. She stepped forward quietly. What's that? She asked gently. He looked up, startled out of his trance, and opened his mouth, then closed it. He held it out to her. She sat beside him and took it carefully. It was small, wooden, and smooth at the corners. When she opened the lid, her breath caught. Inside were letters, old, worn, unsent, each one folded with deliberate care, some stained with age, some with what looked like tears. She pulled the first one out and unfolded it. To the woman I see but cannot reach. Her eyes scanned the page, heart tightening with every word. Dylan didn't look at her. I started writing them after you left the first time, before we were married. That night when we fought and you stayed at your sister's place. I never sent them. I didn't know how to say any of it aloud. Elena held the letter to her chest. You should have. I know, he whispered, but I thought if I wrote them down, maybe I wouldn't explode. She took out another, dated the day after she told him she was pregnant. She read it silently. Her hands trembled. I don't know how to be a father. I can barely be a man. You deserve better, but I'm terrified to let go. Terrified that I'll never find my way back to you if you walk out the door. Elena's voice shook. You were scared. I was paralyzed, Dylan said. And all that time, I watched you carrying hope alone. I watched you smile while holding in oceans of pain. I wrote letters instead of learning how to hold you. She reached into the box again and pulled out the last one. It wasn't sealed like the others, just folded once, the edges curled. If you ever see this, I finally become the man I promised to be. Not because I won you back, but because I chose to stay even when I had no one left to impress. Tears slid down her cheeks before she could stop them. He finally looked at her. I never expected you to forgive me, he said. I just hoped that one day, if you found these, you'd know I was trying, even in the dark. Elena placed the letters back in the box and closed it gently. Then she stood. Come with me, she said. He looked up, confused. Where? Somewhere I should have taken you long ago. The drive was quiet. They didn't speak much. The sky had darkened to a deep navy, and the city lights blurred through the windshield like gold-threaded rain. Dylan followed her directions without question. He didn't know where they were going, but he could feel the weight of it building in her silence. When they arrived, he parked on the edge of a small, gated cemetery. She got out first. He followed slowly. The wind was light, the air crisp, as she led him between gravestones to a small granite marker under a tree. The name etched into it made Dylan stop. Han Soo-min, Elena's father. She crouched down beside the stone, brushing away a few fallen leaves. I used to come here when I couldn't sleep, she said softly. When I felt invisible. After my mom pushed too hard. After you pulled too far away. I'd just sit here and talk to him. Dylan lowered himself beside her. He died when I was 12, she said. He used to tell me I deserved someone who wouldn't ask me to shrink to fit their silence. Someone who would see me. Really see me. She looked at Dylan then. For a long time, I thought you weren't that person. I wasn't, he admitted. But I wanted to be. I just didn't know how. She reached for his hand. You are now. He blinked. I wanted him to meet you. I wanted him to see the man I chose. And I think maybe now I can finally say I made the right choice. Dylan looked at the stone, then back at her. Do you think he'd forgive me? He asked. I think he'd tell you what I'm telling you now, she said. That forgiveness isn't earned all at once. It's 1,000 small choices, 1,000 quiet moments, just showing up even when it's hard, especially then. He let out a breath and nodded. Then I'll keep showing up. They sat in silence again, hand in hand, beneath the tree that whispered softly in the wind. And somewhere between grief and healing, past and future, they made peace with the parts of themselves they thought were too broken to ever be seen. When they stood to leave, Dylan looked down at the marker one last time. Thank you, he whispered, voice thick, for raising her to be strong enough to leave me and kind enough to come back. Elena wiped her cheeks, smiling through tears. They didn't speak until they pulled up to the apartment. He parked and turned off the engine. Elena didn't move right away. She stared out through the windshield, her reflection faint in the glass. There was a time, she said softly, when I thought the only way I could protect myself was to disappear. I told myself leaving was survival. Dylan turned in his seat toward her, listening. But tonight, standing at my father's grave, I realized something. She looked at him now, eyes soft, but unflinching. I never needed to disappear. I just needed to be heard. He reached for her hand then, held it gently between both of his. You don't have to fight to be heard anymore, he said. Not with me, not ever again. She nodded slowly, breathing deeply, eyes shining. When they entered the apartment, the lights were low. The babysitter, an older woman from down the hall Elena trusted, was waiting with a smile. "She's already asleep," she whispered. "Didn't even fuss tonight." Elena thanked her, and after she left, the silence returned. But it was peaceful now. Dylan walked to Haun's room. Elena followed. He stood beside the crib, watching their daughter sleep with a quiet reverence that made Elena pause in the doorway. He turned to her, his voice just above a whisper. "Can I ask you something?" She stepped closer. "Anything. If I had asked you to marry me again," he said slowly. "Not before, not back then, when it was about image or timing or control. But now, after everything, after who I've become, would you say yes?" Her breath caught. She wasn't expecting it. Not here, not now, not like this. She stepped forward until they were inches apart. His eyes were filled with a quiet vulnerability that stripped him bare. She touched his chest. "You don't need to ask that," she said, "because I already said yes. Not with a ring. Not with a ceremony. I said yes the day I gave you another chance to hold our daughter. The day I let you hold me again without asking for anything back." He closed his eyes. Her hand moved to his cheek. "If you ask me again one day when the world is quiet and your heart is still, maybe we'll wear rings again. Maybe we won't. But know this, what we're building now. This is the kind of vow that matters." He leaned into her palm, tears threatening again. "I don't need a ceremony," he whispered. "I just need you. Every day. Every storm." She kissed his forehead softly, then rested her head against his shoulder. And for a long moment they stayed like that. Not lovers. Not husband and wife. Not even parents. Just two people who had broken everything and chosen to gather the pieces together again, no matter how long it would take. After a while, they tiptoed out of the nursery and into the living room. The city lights flickered through the window, distant and quiet. Elena curled up beside him on the couch, her feet tucked under her. He draped a soft blanket over her, then rested his head against hers. Her voice came quietly, almost too soft to catch. "Do you think she'll remember this one day? Fighting for each other." He looked at her and smiled. "No, I think she'll feel it, like air, like warmth. She won't need to remember, because she'll be made of it." And with that, she closed her eyes, safe against him. And he stayed right there, still, awake. Dylan was the first to wake. Elena still slept beside him on the couch, her head resting on his shoulder, a soft rise and fall of breath against his chest. He didn't move. He didn't want to. He only watched her. It was the first time in a long time that peace didn't feel borrowed. Then a quiet knock came at the door. He looked toward the hallway, frowning. Another knock. He gently slid out from under Elena, careful not to wake her. She stirred only slightly, her fingers grasping the fabric of the blanket but not letting go. Dylan crossed the room, glanced at the clock, 7:12 a.m., and opened the door. A tall man in a dark coat stood there, holding a small envelope. "Mr. Park?" the man asked. Dylan nodded. The man handed him the envelope, dipped his head, and walked away without another word. Dylan closed the door, staring at the unmarked envelope. No sender, no seal. He opened it. Inside, one folded page. His breath caught as he read. "You think it's over, but the past always leaves teeth behind." There was no signature, no name, just that single sentence. He stared at the paper for a long moment, heart beginning to race. "Elena," he called softly but urgently. She blinked awake, her eyes adjusting. "What is it?" He walked over and handed her the note. She read it once, then again. The room shifted. "It's a threat," she said, voice quiet but firm. "Maybe," Dylan replied, jaw tight. "Or maybe just someone trying to scare me into stepping away." "But from what?" she asked. "You already gave up the company. Jiyoung resigned. What else is there to take?" Dylan looked down, eyes darkening. "You and Haun." Elena's expression hardened. "I'm not running again," she said. "If someone wants to test us, they'll find out exactly how much we've learned to stand." He sat beside her, still gripping the edge of the letter. "I thought we had made it through the worst," he said. "But maybe healing isn't a finish line. Maybe it's a door we have to keep choosing to walk through, even when we're afraid." She reached for his hand, threading her fingers through his. "We've walked through worse." He looked at her, his voice breaking. "If anything ever happened to you, to her." She placed a finger over his lips. "Nothing will. Not while we're together." He nodded slowly, still holding the note like it might burn through his skin. "We should talk to someone. Report it. Just in case." "We will," she said. "But not out of fear. Out of strength." Just then, Haun let out a soft cry from her crib, as if sensing the shift in energy. Elena stood. Dylan followed her to the nursery. They both leaned over the crib, watching their daughter kick and blink up at them with sleepy eyes. And for a moment, despite the note, despite the fear curling quietly at the edge of their peace, Dylan smiled. Because this tiny, blinking, breathing life was the answer to every threat. She was proof that the world could try to take everything, but it could never undo what was real.